nothing crazy developing yet. But yeah, Jamaican cigars, and well, Royal Jamaica was probably one of the most famous, still around today, no longer comes from Jamaica, but there you go. Anyway, this embargo lasted for 5 years, making it really bad for the cigar industry, and this brings us to the point and shows us why history plays a crucial role in the cigar industry, because it's such an organic, well, it is an organic product. It comes from the earth. So things like revolution or things going on with different countries, and then even things like weather, it's very important not only to know cigar history. That's one thing. If you don't like cigar history, well, then I don't know why you're watching. But if you don't like cigar history, whatever. But as a cigar smoker, it's pretty important to know present history, to keep in touch with the news, what's going on, because any minute all hell could break loose. The Cuban embargo could be lifted. Nicaragua could go to war with Honduras. I don't know. Anything can happen. Which is going to bring me on a completely fucking crazy tangent. But you gotta hear this. Many of you may have heard stuff about, global warming, climate change, I don't know how, some people believe it, some people don't, whatever, but you can't deny facts. And facts are, just recently, several groups of scientists released a report that all had the same conclusion. Things are getting bad. The Antarctic, or what they call the Great Antarctic Ice Shelf, has begun falling apart. Big time. And pieces of it have been witnessed falling into the ocean. I mean, big pieces the size of like Rhode Island, falling into the ocean. And at the current rate, sea level could rise as much as 10 feet within a matter of, the next century. Oh, big deal, century, I'll be dead by then. Well, yeah, you'll be dead, but your kids might not, and their kids definitely won't be. So yeah, it is a big deal. Can we do anything about it? Probably not. The scary thing about this article is that what they're saying is we all knew things were melting, but what they're saying is that the ice shelf has reached a point at which it is irreversible. That's what the reports conclude. And the reports are by different groups of scientists who did not know each other's research or each other's answers, and they both came to the same conclusion. Usually these groups of scientists will be arguing about what's going to happen. Anyway, they both conclude that it's irreversible. We can stop global warming right now. We can shut down every factory, change every light bulb. This time, this part of it's irreversible. They also say that it's only one part. There are many, they compare it to a fuse being lit. And they say there's a lot of other fuses that haven't been lit yet. 10 feet is 10 feet. We don't want to see it rise 100 feet. Anyway, where I'm going with this is the article says if the level was to rise 10 feet, the two main ones I remember were New York City and Miami would be pretty much submerged. Unlivable conditions. Subways flooded, water up to the second story level of many buildings, just complete. Then I thought to myself, Miami. Well, Miami's only 90 miles from Cuba, and Cuba's an island. So, go to my Google, type it in, sea level of Miami, I'm like, 3,000 feet. I'm like, oh, wait a second, 0 to 3,000 feet. That's amazing, too. Cuba's this island that, at one point it's at sea level, and there's other points 3,000 feet in the air. I mean, mountainous, just beautiful. So then anyway, I'm like, okay, what's important? Havana, 6 feet above sea level. Old Havana, right on the water. That would be decimated. If this happens, in about a century from now, there will be no more Old Havana. It will be underwater. Luckily, now that's very sad because it's such a historic place and everything, and luckily, Pinar del Rio region, which is where Vuelta Bajo is, and all the main tobacco growing, is about 600 feet above sea level. So, lucky for us there. But that is my point of, history, weather, geography, all of these things have an impact on cigars. Anyway, back to our little thing. Can you imagine if the Nicaraguan embargo was never lifted? If the Sandinistas were still in power? We wouldn't have, we'd be ordering Nicaraguan cigars online. Are these real Nicaraguan cigars? Is this a real Flor de las Antillas? Hey, that's how it would be, man. Alternate fucking reality. So after the embargo ends in 1990, things start picking up again, and then boom, there's a huge hurricane, 1998. Hurricane Mitch. It's 1998. It's that same year. Was that the year that the Fuente hurricane hit them? But that wasn't Hurricane Mitch. That was some tropical storm. That was a different. Anyway, 1998. This kills hundreds. It's a bad one. Thousands of people die. Farms, crops, businesses, factories, everything is just fucking leveled. Terrible, terrible hurricane. Any business that doesn't have backstock of 10 years is out of business. Padron obviously makes it through, but all these other companies are just flat. And then, that's right at the turn of the millennium, 1998. So very slowly after that, they start to put the pieces back together and things start to pick up. And this is where the story of our man of the hour, Don Pepin, begins. Jose Don Pepin Garcia, creator of a multitude of lines of Nicaraguan brands, and of course, the cigar we're smoking now, the Flor de las Antillas. We're going to talk about our first third soon. Change-up's just starting to happen right now. Okay, here is pretty much the most interesting fact right off the bat. We said here's where our story begins. Well, in 2001, Jose Don Pepin Garcia emigrates from Cuba to Miami, Florida. Unlike all of the other non-Cuban cigar companies we've talked about previously, Fuente, Padron, all the other ones, whoever came from Cuba, Don Pepin is the only one who stayed in Cuba and came way later, in 2001. So that makes it very interesting to begin with. What was he doing all that time in Cuba? Well, he was working at cigar factories. But he wasn't just working at cigar factories. He was a big shot over there. If they had a level above master roller, he was a grandmaster roller. Won a multitude of awards, was highly recognized for his rolling skills. In fact, I have my notes, and then I have some things from the web that I want to read that I'm going to break into. So Jose Garcia, his name christened, it says, Jose Garcia. Pepin, everybody calls him Don Pepin, was born into a large family of tobacco growers, cigar makers in Baez, which was a town in the Villa Clara province in Cuba. So, the Cuban years. Don Pepin began his life with tobacco in December 1961 at the age of 11, when he began working in a factory in Baez owned by an uncle. 1961, owned by an uncle. So right before the revolution, the embargo, everything like that. In March 1963, he began working at the Felix Rodriguez export factory in Baez, where he worked until he emigrated in Nicaragua in 2001. So according to this, he worked at this one factory the entire time, from 63 to 2001, till he came to Miami. He spent 30 years in Cuba developing his skills as a torquedor and blender, earned numerous accolades for his blending abilities, and achieved the highest ranking possible as a cigar roller, a Class 8 master. So, blending, interesting. Blending. Well, what was he blending? Because there are only 27 Cuban brands. 2001. Very beginning very early first edition limitadas, but I don't know, maybe he helped develop the edition limitadas. I don't know. Oh, what an idiot I am. San Cristobal. Cigars like that. Vega Robena. Cuaba. All these cigars that happened. Remember that little period there? 96, 97, 98? That's interesting. Maybe he had a hand in the actual blending of those cigars. Especially Cuaba. I would say Cuaba. And San Cristobal. Robena is a different story. Robena, we're going to get into that. You know what, I'm not even going to say anything about that. We're going to talk about that later. But this was a guy who owned a farm. I'm not sure. Maybe he blended that too. Don Alejandro Robena. Maybe he blended that too. That's interesting. So yeah, we're going to talk about our first third, but there's one of those connections. This was an assumption, obviously, but let's look at it a little more analytically. He's in Cuba for 30 years. They wouldn't have let him blend cigars until he was at least a master roller and then some. He would have had to have been pretty well known. Otherwise, he wouldn't be touching a fucking thing as far as blending. The only period at which he would have been well known enough to blend from there to the time he left in 2001 would have been that period right there where those cigars came out. The late 90s or the mid to late 90s, where you have San Cristobal, Cuaba, Vega Robena, Trinidad of course, but supposedly that blend was already created. I mean, the cigar existed. Who knows if that blend was remade before they released it? You just never know. But yeah, interesting. So, where'd we leave off? Class 8 Master. Among the awards he won was the Productivity Prize for rolling 320 Julietas in 4 hours. 320 Churchill-sized cigars in 4 hours. Wow, that's fast. That is fast. Those guys at Gurkha with those Lieberman devices, those machines, they can't even make that many cigars. The Cuban press often compared the speed and dexterity of his rolling to that of a magician. He is also a tabaquero maestro, master blender, and was also a teacher of teachers in the arts of blending and rolling cigars. Big shot. He helped blend cigars such as Cohiba, Portuguese, and Monte Cristo. Oh, okay. Well, in the sense we're talking here, this is with all cigars really. In the sense we're talking here, you have to realize that crops change over time. One year is very different from another year, is very different from another year. So each year, the blend has to be tweaked to reclaim that prized flavor that the brand is recognized for. You understand? So, while one year a Cohiba may use a leaf from this part of a farm or from this area, or it might use 2 Seco and 1 Ligero, they may have to add a little more Ligero and take away a little Seco, or say, well, we're not going to use the leaf from that section of the farm for the Seco. You know, it's like that. So he creates basically recreating those blends. But of course here that's why I hate these things. They say it like, you know, and then somebody new to cigars reading this would be like, he blended Cohiba? You know, don't say that. He helped reblend cigars, basically, such as Cohiba, Portuguese, Monte Cristo. During the 1990s, he was in charge of quality assurance for the Cohiba brand and was also a consultant of several Cuban cigar makers. Also during the 1990s, he was accounted Cuba's most productive master roller. So that was him in Cuba. Very interesting. Now, I'm wondering why, before we talk about our first third, he left Cuba. He's got all this fame and recognition. Probably not a ton of money, though. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much money they would give him. Maybe he was that important, but, you know, maybe it was his dream to always own his own business, and he couldn't own his own. You know what it probably was, honestly? Maybe he wanted a better life for his children, but I think it has something to do with he was as far as he would ever get if he stayed in Cuba. He was at the top of the ladder. You can't own your own business. You know, as far as in the cigar industry, he wasn't going to own a factory or have his own brand, you know. So he would have to leave and go elsewhere if he was going to do that. A guy like this choosing to use Nicaraguan tobacco in order to do that says a hell of a lot about Nicaraguan tobacco. And it really is great tobacco. This cigar right here, you know, it's funny. The first third, there really wasn't a ton of flavor. I gotta put it plainly. Yet, I'm enjoying it immensely. Because it is one of the best rolls, best draws I've smoked in all the cigars we've reviewed so far. I mean, it's really a great draw. It's getting a little deeper now. It's getting a little oaky, you know, a little bit of bass coming in. Peppers died down a lot. Once in a while, there's a bit of a sweet note at the tip of the tongue, a little bit of a chocolatey note. There is some sourness. Often, there's that sour note. There's very little salt here for a Nicaraguan cigar. You know, it's actually a little floral almost, in some senses. The aroma is gorgeous. The aroma is sweet, cocoa-y. It's just really, really nice, you know. So I would say on a level of construction, draw, burn, aroma, fantastic cigar. I wish this cigar had a bit more flavor. To me, cigars are all about flavor, you know. Of course, other things make, like I just said, I'm enjoying this cigar simply because it's masterful in the way it's crafted. And it has flavor, but not, it's very subtle in the beginning. Our first third is very subtle flavor, except for the pepper, which lasted for about the first maybe between 5 and 10 puffs. But we do have something kicking in right now. There's a bit of dankness to the cigar, you know. It's excellent. Excellent. I mean, this is brand new also. This is not, I wish it was, like certain cigars, for instance, like the Padron 45 Maduro. I have a cigar, I have 5 of them actually. I wish I had a box. But I have 5 from the same batch that would have been used to for Cigar Aficionado to smoke and declare it as #1 cigar of the year. I think I mentioned this once before, but Cigar Aficionado used to come into the shop I worked at all the time to pick cigars for rating. We were one of their choices. So I have cigars not only from that year, but from the very batch, you know. This cigar is from right now. It's not from 2012. I just bought this thing last week with the idea of smoking it and rating it on the show. And saying to myself, you know, it's time we introduce Don Pepin. So that's our first third. You know, very subtle, kind of elegant, you know. A lot through the nose. You know, I said before, it's more floral now. But there was some sweetness, there was some black cherry, a little bit of pepper. It's very smooth for a Nicaraguan cigar through the nose, actually. Very, very nice. I'm having a little bit of a burn thing here. I'll just see if that catches up. But that's that. So let's put away our one page I wanted to read there and go back to my notes. So Don Pepin comes into Miami in 2001. This guy, this is a man with a plan. This is a man with a plan, and as we'll see, he has done in a few years what it took other cigar makers 100 years to do. This guy was ready to rock and roll. Say goodnight, Max.